Hi, my name is Darren DeBari, and I'm writer-director of The Last Semester. This opening graphic, which is a thinker, was done by a fellow named Moshir Waba. This film was shot in digital video in 2002, later converted to black and white, which I think is much more fitting. And thanks to co-writer, producer, and main actor, who you see in the middle, Greg Wilson, with that crazy curly hair, this film would not have been done without his effort, his hard work. The woman on the right is a camera woman that Greg and I had met while doing camera work at the Meadowlands. Her name was Carrie Clifford, and she was kind enough to come down the shore to A to Z Video to shoot this sequence. God, do I miss video stores. This place was in South Jersey, and now we live in a whole different time with streaming and everything else. The fellow on the left, his name is Ian J. Keeney, and he answered a little flyer that said we needed a cinematographer for this movie. So he was one of the cinematographers and ended up becoming a really good director in his own right, wrote and directed a film. There I am as the video store manager. He wrote and directed a film called Dark Fantasy that Greg Wilson and I had a bunch of actors in this film got to act in, as well as a film called The Secret, which I had made on video, and then he converted, made into a film later on. Wonderful to work with him. Greg Wilson, and a fellow named Scott DiPaolo, who you're going to see, were in charge of a company called Mindbreak Entertainment. We made thought-provoking films. We made a number of short films. We did well at film festivals, but never got distribution. This work was done basically because of the love of film. Blood, sweat, and tears, the entire thing. We worked very hard to make this film. Having locations was terrific. The fact that A to Z let us shoot here is great. Introducing Greg's character, the wily character of Max, for the first time was wonderful. In the original cut, this sequence for some reason was not there, and I don't know why, because it establishes his character oh so well. And this little joke about the video store clerk being fired, and then we cut to a real-life policeman, Tom's River Police Department, and a real police car. That little joke pays off as she lost her job, and now she's being arrested for prostitution because she needed the money. There was a glide cam that Greg Wilson purchased and did a lot of the shooting, him and another fellow named Steve Strollo, who we met at the Meadowlands. This was a wonderful purchase to get some smooth, wonderful shots, and this is how we introduced the character of Detective Minetti, played by Scott DiPaolo. At the time, Scott was working in Atlantic City, getting very little sleep, but it would not stop him from coming to the set, acting his part, helping us move equipment, getting food and drink for the crew. Without his effort and the effort of Greg Wilson, this film would never, ever have happened, and it's really amazing. And what's also amazing, again, is to have a location. When you're low budget and you're not paying anybody, the fact that the Toms River Police Department let us use this location just adds to the believability and the credibility, and it makes you look like you have a budget even when you hardly have a budget. So that was really, really nice, and it was a great way to introduce Scott's character of Detective Minetti, and he does a wonderful job. And I remember asking one of the policemen, what do you think, when he was walking out of the police car? And we introduced him, and he said, no, he looks like the real thing. He looks like the real detectives that come through here all the time. And I thought, hey, that's a great compliment to Scott. There's Ocean County College in 2002, and we're going to go right to Georgian Court. Now, we needed Georgian Court for the dorm room scenes. Greg Wilson had actually gotten a permit to shoot there for 5 days. The only thing that was really hard is the dorm room that was set up with all the props that set it up and all the equipment we carried in the scorching hot summer of 2002. We had to take a picture of it all because we couldn't keep it in the room overnight. So when we came back the next day with the equipment, we had to set the room up the same exact way that it was before. This character here of Max's roommate, Greg's character, he's leaving at the beginning because Max is such a wily, crazy character. He just can't live with him anymore. That's played by my friend Will Storer, who I had worked with at Barnes & Noble a few years before. So when you make these low-budget movies, you meet friends, you meet actors, and whoever can show up on the day. And it helps. This is the old art room at Ocean County College. Greg is looking out the window and looking at women. And the painting you see on the left was done by a woman named Terry Pizzuti. The film is dedicated to her. That's Greg's nephew playing young him, and Greg's brother playing his father. The film is dedicated to the memory of Terry Pizzuti, my father, and when we recut this film, Greg's father, who had passed on. This is actress Sally James, who we had auditioned in New York City, who was wonderful. And this is Max's film. The great thing about converting this film to black and white is it was a great juxtaposition to the color. We only show color in this film a few times, and every time we do, it's when we're showing a student film, and if anything, it just illustrates the power of film, the color juxtaposed with our everyday life, why it's important, why it has the impact that it does. There is Eric Franco, who was a cameraman who does a wonderful job of playing Jake the frat guy, a real asshole. We all knew guys like that. And he also contributes a song to this film. And Max's film just proves to be more and more absurd. And the film class is pretty much disgusted by it, as they should be. But Max takes it personally because that's Max. This is his life. This is the world that he understands. Film. Here's Allie Anderson, a wonderful actress that played Sandy. I wasn't sure about her at the audition, but thanks to Scott DiPaolo, he said, no, she's the one. There's my friend Katie Gutman, who was the puker, which does a really nice job. We'll see her again in the film class. And the fellow with his head down at the desk was Dennis. The woman who just raised her hand's name was Cecilia. On the right is our friend Marjorie, who was a camera woman at the Meadowlands who got Cecilia involved. So here's Greg's character defending how terrible the film is. Now, Beth Brierly, who plays the film teacher, the role was actually offered to a fellow named John Morrison, who was a mentor acting teacher. And a friend, he turned it down and said, have Beth Brierly do it, who was a wonderful actress and teacher, so she did. And in return, we also got everybody from John's acting class who played the film students. So I'll be forever grateful for John for doing that, as well as for Beth Brierly for doing such a terrific job. Here's a flashback and flash forward. This was added in the latest cut. This film has been recut about 3 or 4 times over the years and was originally over 2 hours. Have no idea why. When the nice, tight, strong, best cut is really 72 minutes. There's an expression that they have that they say, you have to kill your darlings. You can't become so in love with a scene just because it was directed well. If it doesn't serve as a story, it has to go. And there's a lot of scenes that did. And as a filmmaker and looking over it over 20 some years, I realized, there are things I would have done differently. There are things that I had to fix afterward. And I'm glad that I did. I'd like to think that we all evolve as we get older. We all become better. I wish I knew then what I know now. The film would have been better from the beginning. But now it's exactly what it should be, and I'm proud of it. I really am. I love the introduction here to the character of Sandy. She really enjoys Max's work while no one else can understand it. There's something different about her, and her and Max connect on a different level than him and Jane connect, and I like that. I really like that a lot. Now, what is she slipping into his hand? We don't know, but he's absolutely enthralled with her, attracted to her, and we see some jealousy from Jane there, which is really nice. Going down the hall in the old Fine Arts building at Ocean County College, so much of it has changed. Here's a little interesting little cut. We do this again in the film where we show kind of this illustrated type of thing. The idea of showing Max's mind being so visual, I just wanted to illustrate that a few times. There's Steve Strollo, who just walked by, who was our other cinematographer, making his little cameo. And those stairs behind them in the Fine Arts building are no longer there because in 22 years, things change, especially on the campus at Ocean County College, which is playing the fictitious Wexler U in this movie. Again, I really love the smoothness of these glide cam shots. They really made a difference. The chemistry between these two was really nice. And here we have Jake again, who is being kind of misinformed that the movie went over really well. And also telling the character of Max the only reason he decided to help in the movie is because he knows there's good-looking girls in the class and he wants to impress them. So this is the beginning of what will be some real conflict between these characters. It should be noted that Greg Wilson and I entered a screenplay contest 2 years before in a film called The Video Store Murders, where the main character was Max, and this was a character who would actually murder customers of the video store who disrespected film or treated their films badly, and he was also jealous of a filmmaker that was making something. And Greg Wilson thought it was such a funny idea, and so did I, to explore what would Max's story be before all that happened. I mean, that's like the origin story of the video store murders is the last semester. So it's kind of funny that we just continued with that and decided to make a movie of this. This is my friend Dennis Bolger, who I worked with as a cameraman at the Meadowlands and then years later at Freehold Raceway, who actually plays a character named Dennis. He wasn't in the original script, but he was so funny, Dennis, that we wrote this character kind of based on him. Now we cut to the scene at the frat. It was actually shot in an apartment owned by my friend Will and Jess in Silverton. That's me on the left. That's Dennis by the refrigerator. The fellow kissing the girl from the film class is a guy named Willie Colon, who is a technical director at the Meadowlands. And there's a bunch of actors throughout. Our friend Sharon is the girl who's passed out and puking over there. There's Katie Gutman and Eddie Lukes. There's Jessica. And there's Eric Franco. There's Marjorie. And there's Cecilia. And again, I have to compliment ad nauseum Greg's wonderful glide cam work during this. Shooting this sequence was a lot of fun, and I remember a bunch of us actors afterwards going out for drinks and eating and just having a good time and telling stories. And that's the nice thing also about doing independent film, the people you meet, the experiences, and you have a bunch of actors that are meeting technical people who want to be actors. Later on, we worked on other projects. It's just really nice to be surrounded by like-minded and creative people. That's me in the middle there with Dennis, the frat guy, and Cecilia. And this whole scene is set up where Eric's character, Jake, realizes that Max's film was a joke, as was his performance, and he's going to be really, really upset, and that's going to lead to some trouble later in the film. So this was nicely set up. Marjorie did a really good job, as did Dennis, making fun of Eric and getting him so mad that he just storms out of this place. He's just so pissed off. Back to the front of the Fine Arts Building at Ocean County College, and then back to the dorm at Georgian Court. My friend Sue Kilhefner, my friend Corey Catalano coming out there. Zip Up His Fly, we know what they were up to, and my friend Mike Vidal showing up and making fun of him, which was really funny. We didn't have many people there because it was the summertime, so anyone we can get in just to see that there was some, campus life going on in the dorms when we really didn't have anybody. And later we make a point of saying how a lot of people were away from the dorms because there was some campus bonfire going on. So there's a knock at the door, and guess what? Jake is there, and he is pissed, and he is with his frat brothers. So Greg Wilson's character, Max, is in very big trouble. He's about to get a nice hot shower that these frat guys feel that he deserves. This one over here is my friend Mike Toms on the left. Really good guy who I had met through the fellow Corey Catalano you saw in the previous scene. There is a flashback right there. And then this interesting bunch of shots. I still remember the steam going in the camera for that scene. And there's the film teacher laughing. And here's Max right now upset with his burned chest, being forced to go into that shower, and he is mad, promising that Jake will not be in another one of his films. Max's feelings of not being understood are definitely based on my time at Montclair. My first year there was wonderful. My last semester, funny enough, the title of this film, I felt very rejected, very out of place, and I think that's really where this film came from, were those feelings. The character of Jane tries to understand Max, and she gives him support and she gives him love because of what they get involved in. But I think Sandy later on in the film is the character who truly understands him because she's different, like he's different, and they connect on that level. It's just, what's so interesting about the human equation. You can meet so many people in this life and connect on so many different levels. But feeling misunderstood is universal. And I certainly felt that when I was at Montclair and when I left that part of my life. And I think that a great deal of those feelings ended up in this movie. I really love this scene between these two. Originally it was cut a few different ways, but I like this very long cut where they are just talking back and forth and the pacing is there and you get to see them think between their words. And it just added to their connection, to their chemistry. They were both so good together. And you really get to know the characters through this scene. And sometimes there's nothing better than just a stationary camera when you can look at the characters, you can listen to them, you can observe them, and little by little, you are just getting consumed in what's going on. As this film went on, I think we became better writers, better filmmakers. And as years went on and I went to recut it, I think I became better with pacing and a number of character things. But life is a progression if you keep with it. You know, as Clint Eastwood used to say, his father used to say, you know, you either progress or you decay. But if you're doing it right, artistically, you'll progress. You know, I mean, there are times you make bad choices, and that's all part of it. But it was so great to see these two just act with their hearts, and they did every day. You know, and one thing you have to realize is just how many takes you do. And it's a credit to the actors that they can keep it fresh and looking real and looking like the first time. And I look at these scenes and think, oh my God, we were in the art room forever shooting this. And they shot this so many times. And yet, they brought such heart and such believability to it. And when you start to become invested in these characters, that's when you really got something. And I got to give these two a lot of credit because their characters had to go through some crazy stuff. You got to love Greg Wilson. He purchased this lamp just so we could break it. Yes, everything had to be realistic. And again, this was a nice location. It was a really, really nice art room for years. And I believe, I know next door used to be a photography room. A lot of things have changed at Ocean County College since then. But it was really great to be working in these actual locations. We have Bobby Krantz to thank, who at the time was at Ocean County College, who gave us she gave us full permission to shoot all over the campus, and we took full advantage of that. I can't imagine us making this film anywhere else. Greg Wilson and Scott DiPaolo and I had met at Ocean County College. We had known a lot of those people. Beth Brierley, I had gone to Montclair and she was working there at the time. So it's nice to see this group of actors and people circling back from these locations and these places that we had gone and that we had shared. And it was so nice to display Ocean County College at that time because that had been a very special place for Greg Wilson and Scott DiPaolo and I. We had met there. We had become friends there. We had done some acting there. We had shot, after there, we had shot a bunch of short films, and then we would be involved with other people's independent film projects, and then we always wanted to make this one. So all of a sudden now her glasses are off, cliche, and Max sees her for how beautiful she is, and those two have had a roll in the hay, so to speak, though there is no hay in that room, but I think you get my point. And things get a little different between them from this point on in the film. And again, that sweetness, that chemistry that Greg and Sally had. So he's leaving now and boom, he runs into Beth Brierley. And she's talking to him and he decides, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe I overreacted, though I don't think he did. They treated him pretty bad in his film class. But she convinces him to come back to film class. So he will. And that's a good thing. Because if he doesn't, well, that part of the film just doesn't work. And another nice thing about this scene is, despite the fact that we saw his teacher laughing at him, we get a very kind of nice human conversation between these two, a very human conversation. And it's nice. And we feel like there's kind of a little bit of an understanding. Again, she asks him to come back. He comes back and you feel, hey, maybe things will be a little bit different. But then again, this is the world of Max. And as you know, the world of Max, things are not exactly normal. Matter of fact, you can say that Max and the word normal are more like distant cousins. So it was a nice little close-up on Beth Brierley, who was a super talented actress, by the way, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. By the way, if you go back to and listen to some more of this, and if you have a penny for how many times I say the word wonderful on here, you would probably be very rich by now. So Greg's character comes back and finds Sandy because she gave him that little note, handed it to him, the location of her room, and there he is in her room right now, taking it all in, and he is impressed because what does he see but movie posters? I mean, hey, this is his kind of girl. and she looks good, and she's on the bed. And what I liked about Allie Anderson is she doesn't have an easy part. It's a tricky part. And what I like about her is that she had such confidence in this part. And there was a little bit of Lauren Bacall about her that I liked. There was a little bit of kind of like a toughness. She could, kind of stand with the big boys and be just as good and just as strong. I mean, there's a room full of technical people and one woman, her, and she was really good. And Sally James was great that same way too. They were just fantastic. They were so confident. They just did the work. They just did the work every day. They showed up. Her and Greg have a really funny chemistry. Together, they work extremely well. I always thought this was a very sexy scene. And Greg's reactions to her is just a lot of fun to observe. She's like, here, take a drink. And he's like, okay. And then she pulls it right out of his mouth. And she's just talking about how she believes in him, as a director. She liked his work from day one, all that stuff. She just, and he's never had anyone who has accepted him that way, truly, So this is all new to him. This is a whole new world to him. What has he gotten himself involved with? I mean, this is after, him and Jane were both virgins up until an hour ago. And then he wanted to see what was going on with this woman. I mean, this pretty much encapsulates the feeling of any young, red-blooded American guy. He's young and he's horny and he's attracted to her as well. This is a certain time of life when that's all you think about. But all of a sudden, the big reveal, whoop, she got some man parts there. Yes, we discover here, after a little crying game reference and joke, that she has a penis. Now, keep in mind that this was made in 2002. Despite the fact that her character is well acted and Allie Anderson grounds her in such reality, despite the fact that you will feel so much empathy for her character, I feel that today this character would garner some criticism and it would be unfair. Back then, in 2002, you just wrote a character, how they felt, what they thought, perfections, imperfections. Now there is this incredible judgment. Everything from years ago, judged by today's standards, put in a box. And that kind of thing really limits creativity. And even worse, it eliminates truth. Now look at society now. Look at social media now. Look at the way political parties play this issue against one another. The truth is actually in question. That means we live in very dangerous times, and people can just say things like, oh, well, you're a man. How can you write for a hermaphrodite? And that itself is prejudice, because that means you are cutting down your idea of what you think a human being is capable of. Why can't a writer just write? Why can't a straight actor play a gay part? Why are these things seen as prejudice when they're not? They're just part of the creative process, an extension of ourselves. Actors like to live many lives, and poor Allie Anderson, who is not a hermaphrodite, would probably be judged for playing one, and that just shouldn't be that way. So anyway, we found out that she was also on some drugs and she was drinking and she passed out. So what does Max think, being that full-blooded American guy? Oh, let's get back to Jane. We just had sex an hour ago and maybe we can have it again. Heck, we'll go back to my dorm because my roommate is no longer my roommate. So what do you say? And of course, she is going to say yes. And it's very sweet. We used to have a crude joke in that sequence, and I'm glad we got rid of it because their relationship is very sweet between Max and Jane. There's me as passed out guy there, and it's good because I was around because, again, there weren't many people around. This is back at Georgian Court, by the way, and this is by a front desk. Now, the guy working behind the front desk is a really good friend of mine named Steve Michalkowski. And years ago, thanks to his purchase of a camcorder, we began making what were called the Mind Break movies, which later became the name of the production company. But we had a movie, 3 movies. It was a Mind Break trilogy starring Stephen and I. So it was so nice to give him a part. And he was wonderful showing up, just terrific. Hey, I said, wonderful again. You get $5. And here we are in the Georgian courtroom, and Jake is waiting, and he's pissed off because someone took the movie to the frat and played it and kicked him out. He starts acting like a jerk, hits Jane, and Max has had enough, and boom, hits him. Head goes right into the television, and now Jake has been electrocuted and is dead. Hence the original title, The College Birders, before it was changed to The Last Semester. But when I realized it really wasn't just about murder, I realized The Last Semester was more fitting. And we have a nice reveal of the Travis Bickle poster that's behind him. And Taxi Driver is one of Max's favorite movies. So it was a nice time to actually show it. Jane wakes up and sees that he's dead. And these two have to start plotting. What are we going to do now? How are we going to deal with this whole situation? Again, when I look at this scene and I see all the movie posters, I think about how we had to take them down every day and then put them back up when we returned because of our limited time shooting at Georgian Court. Oh boy, when I think about those little things, you think about so many things that happen on a set, people showing up late, problems with locations, all of a sudden it's windy, it's rainy. These are all the things you have to put up with day to day on an independent film set. Thank goodness Greg Wilson took his job as producer just as seriously as he did as an actor, scouting locations, all those other things. When you have a producer behind you, and Greg Wilson has been like that many times in my life, someone who's behind you and supports your creativity, that just makes it so much easier. And that's what's great about working on the indie level instead of the studio level, where people vote by committee whether they should keep a scene in or not, or as they're doing now, just checking boxes in Hollywood to get, certain things and certain people in certain scenes, even if they don't fit. I mean, geez, that was Stephen again wondering what was going on. She came to the door with her bra, and he realized, oh, these two are having sex, I'll leave. Meanwhile, what are they going to do? He takes Jake's keys and says he lives across the hallway. Let's just take his body and carry him back there. So we have a little bit of a nice little suspense scene going in the hallway at Georgian Court. And we had a really good time shooting this. This was fun to do. Again, a nice stationary shot. And you have the little music playing in the background. And they're carrying the body. And, oh no, they dropped it. Oh, did the RA just hear them? Oh no, Stephen heard them. What's he going to do? So we have a little bit of suspense here. And these scenes are a lot of fun to shoot. And just as the body's being dragged in the door, bum bum, the door is going to open up, and it looks like the RA just missed all that action. So that was a nice little suspense scene right there. Now we see Stephen walking down the hall, not unlike Michael Myers, except he's wearing shorts and not a white Captain Kirk mask, and does a nice little job. And we cut back to the dorm room when these two were talking about everything that happened. They took the remains of the television and put it in a big suitcase and hid it under the bed. So that's going to be a point of some suspense later on. And they're talking about what a night it was and how horrifying and exhilarating it was. And then we get to know these characters a little more now. Now, what's so incredible about this scene is this is one of the first things that Sally shot with Greg. And they really had the chemistry from Jump Street. They just really did. And the funny part is that they did a rehearsal right before then. And to this day, I'm kicking myself because I should have shot the rehearsal. Because as good as this scene is, and it's really good and it works, it was even better when it was the first time rehearsal. It's funny that no matter how you write or direct a scene, one thing you cannot create is chemistry. It's either there or it's not. And a film can live and die by that. These two are so good together, and they have a lot of dialogue and a lot of scenes, and their parts are tricky at times, so it was great that they had that. I've seen films where the leads had zero chemistry, and no matter how well written the whole experience was, it just didn't work because you didn't believe them. And these two were completely 100% believable. So despite the fact that Jake is dead, these two are really connecting. And this film, which has such a dark sense of humor, really makes a point of that. Sometimes tragedy brings us together. Sometimes extreme circumstances bring us together. I mean, this is nothing new. Just look at history. That's just how things work out here. And now we have a nice little scene which he ruins by quoting a porn film. So much for their sweet romantic love. But she says, look, just don't quote any porn films, okay? And he's like, okay. So they're about to kiss when all of a sudden we hear a scream from the next room. Jake's roommate is back, has discovered his body. So these two got to go out and play innocent. And here's Detective Minetti, who we saw at the beginning of the film, the Toms River Police Department. What was really nice and what really helped the believability of this scene was the use of the ambulance. We use an ambulance twice in the movie, and we had it pretty much for one day. We shot a scene earlier, and then we shot a scene at night here in the parking lot of the Fine Arts Building at OCC. This shot was from inside the ambulance, which was nice, and it was great having that. Those little tiny things you can do to just make it more believable. So now Detective Minetti will start asking questions, and us as viewers should become a little bit nervous. Is he going to figure out what's going on? And that's really the fun for the next part of the film, truly to the end. Will Max get away with it? Will he see through his and Jane's little charade? We're not sure. But for now, he says goodnight and walks into the parking lot to his car. Meanwhile, they're recapping the room, what they have done, what's going on. And Max thinks this is like a movie, and she reminds him that it's reality. And he says, yeah, that part always gets in the way, doesn't it? And I think anybody can relate to that line, probably several times in the course of their life. And we hear a voiceover from Max as he's saying, within a day, he lost his virginity and killed somebody. Couldn't believe that Sandy had a dick. And worse, it was bigger than his. Geez, I can't even imagine, a movie like this being pushed to a studio these days where 1 million people would be offended rather than just seeing the humor of a situation. Realize you're not degrading a person, you're just laughing. The whole point of a dark comedy is I think a dark comedy more than a regular comedy points out a lot of things that are uncomfortable about life. And, being uncomfortable is part of the human equation. So I think that's a good thing, and I think that's where a lot of the comedy in this film comes from, is just at times being uncomfortable or some dark things happen. Here we are at the old Ocean County College Arboretum. This is the next day where Max meets up with Sandy, and they talk. This gorgeous place is still there, but what isn't there is a beautiful old theater that was back further in the woods. I am so glad that we had a scene there, that these characters had a scene there, that we shot there. It was a really nice day of filming. I remember me and Allie Anderson during break actually talking about movies we liked. We talk about romantic comedy, Seems Like Old Times, Neil Simon, starring Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn. I always like those little moments between scenes when you can kind of get to know your actors a little bit and, just have some moments between the whole technical exercise of it, of the light has to go here and the camera's going to go here, when you can just kind of be free and kind of talk about life. And it kind of just, it breaks the ice, it makes things easier. And here's a nice camera shot to go to the front of the Arboretum. And then we're going to go see that beautiful little theater that I was talking about. Apparently in the old days in Ocean County College, a lot of people did theater here and also smoked weed. And I'd like to think that maybe they still are doing that back here. And there's Max acting out a scene very extremely for Sandy. And Sandy is watching and clapping and enjoying. And we go into a little montage here where they're both peeing and he's looking over at her penis, and then he looks back when he sees her look. And then they run through here laughing, and then this scene segues back into color as we realize we were back in the film room again, and this time we are seeing the character of Sally's movie. But unlike Max's movie, which was mocked to no end, this one is being completely and utterly praised for every single simple choice that she made. I mean, it's a nice looking film. This is a class, film criticism, and it's Katie Gutman here saying, this is good. I really like the idea of the flower, and they're all praising this film, and you know that this is just going to grate on Max. And he's having a little voiceover here. And he's also wondering who in this class showed the film at the frat that got Jake so mad that he came to his dorm room that night. So he's really trying to figure out, that's a bit of a mystery, who in this class showed the film, because it had to be somebody in this class that took his movie and showed it to Jake. So Max hides out in the film room to see which of the students showed it, because they have to return his movie. And who is it? But Sally. I love this scene. It's fun. It's a little suspenseful. The music is really nice. And this is the Meadowlands tape room that we use. So it was actually nice to shoot at the Meadowlands, this little scene. Again, it lent credibility, and I love this little spiral staircase. This just reminded me of something out of Hitchcock. I don't know what it was, but it was really interesting. So Max realizes she's the one who showed the movie. And look what happened as a result of that. Jake being so angry, he ended up killing Jake. So what is Max going to do now? Now he has Sally's movie. And he realizes he's going to edit the film. He says, time to edit. So that will pay off later. Meanwhile, we're back at Georgian Court, and Detective Minetti has been waiting for Max to show up. Here we are at the Ocean County College campus again, and these two have a lot of dialogue here, a lot of dialogue. I love, again, the glide cam that was done here, and I believe Steve Strollo was doing it that day. I could be wrong. It could have been Ian Keeney. It's been 22 years, but whoever did it did a really, really nice job. If I have a regret about this sequence is that I would have probably condensed the dialogue a bit, though it is nice because you get to know a little bit about Minetti in this scene, and it's fun to watch these characters play out their little cat and mouse. They had good chemistry, and these two were really good friends. At the time that this was being shot, Greg actually lived at Scott's house. And being good friends with someone you act with just makes the whole process easier. Because one thing you don't want to do on film is appear like you're acting. Now, Beth Brierly, who plays the film teacher, who I mentioned earlier, we were in a play over 30 years ago at Montclair, and she's so big and so alive and so presentational on stage. But once she was in front of the camera, she just brought herself down to earth, was small and real. And I think really the best actors know the difference between mediums, and it's great. And these two just had a really terrific, comfortable way of dealing with each other. And that off-camera friendship helps deal with those day-to-day things that you run into on an independent film. Weather problems, people showing up late, just long days, technical issues. It really helps to be friends. To make movies with a bunch of friends is terrific. If you get the opportunity to do it, and if you can all be friends after the experience, you'll be even better friends. And I've been friends with these guys for a very long, long time. So it's fair to say I really enjoyed their playful chemistry. And it was fun to see what they were going to do when and how they were going to do it. And you can write certain scenes, and then the actor comes in and does something you don't even plan on, and that ends up being the thing, and the thing that you remember. So these guys did a lot of that. So Minetti is getting closer to figuring out what happened that night with Jake's death. And how does it tie in with Max? That's part of the fun and the suspense of this whole thing. And again, I just get such a nostalgic rush looking at the old Ocean County College campus. Now, this part of the campus has not changed very much, but I guess I just think of the time. I was 30 years old. And let me tell you, the world was a very different place 21 years ago. Very, very different. Just a few years before, Kevin Smith had written and directed Clerks dirt cheap, and everyone just felt like, hey, we can make an independent film. So it was great. Here we are back now in the dorm. Max is leading Minetti in and told him about a broken mirror that happened while he was having sex with Jane. Of course, that's something that him and Jane concocted. And Minetti takes a piece of that glass. And we don't know why or what the reason, but we know that he's playing with Max a little bit, and that's the point when we really start to think he's suspecting Max. So Max just continues on and plays innocent, and eventually Minetti just leaves. Says, don't worry about it. You had nothing to do with it. It wasn't your movie that caused this whole thing. But he is aware of it. And he tells him, I would like to come to your film class and maybe ID the girl who showed the movie. And he said, that's fine. And Minetti leaves. And then Max turns to the poster again, old Travis Bickle, and pretty much imitates what he sees on the poster. And that's some nice foreshadowing there once again. And here is Sally back in the art room. Max is calling her up and making sure that they get their story straight if she talks to Minetti again. So there's this whole sense of worry. What's going to happen? What's Minetti going to do? Will he believe their story? Here we are back at Toms River Police Station. And we nicely cut this in. There's a real policeman right there, buzzing him in. So here's Minetti at the Toms River Police Station. And we cut into this forensics room, which is actually the science building at Ocean County College. This very tall fellow is a good actor friend of ours named Alan Boyd. Alan is known to have a big scruffy beard, but when he showed up on the set that day, he had gotten his hair cut and shaved the beard, walked in with his lab coat, and was extremely believable as this forensics guy. So he is telling Minetti that the piece of glass he gave him from the mirror does not match the piece of glass they found in Jake's head, because the piece of glass they found in Jake's head was from a television picture tube. Minetti wonders, somebody threw this guy head first into a television? And he says, well, that would explain the immediate electrocution to the head. And then there's a moment of, and Minetti runs out of the room. Now we are back at Georgian Court. There's a knock at the door. Minetti is going back to Max's room. And there's Max putting the remains of the TV in the suitcase back under the bed and opening the door for Minetti as the cat and mouse continues. There's an old expression that says, there's the movie you write, the movie you direct, and the movie you edit. And you never fully understand that until you get involved with a project like this. Some scenes don't work on film, and you shoot them and they just don't fit into the movie, and you cut them. Some scenes have to be directed a certain way to work. Maybe they were better on paper than they were on the screen. You have to fix that as a director. But when all else fails, it all goes to the editing. Sometimes you can juxtapose scenes that you never even thought of doing that, and all of a sudden it works. It's fascinating how editing can completely and utterly change a movie. The original cut of this being over 2 hours, like I had mentioned before, and so tight and so strong at 72 minutes. It's an interesting lesson to be learned, and I had the opportunity to teach film at Ocean County College years back, and that was one of the things that we talked about. But you truly have to make a film to really understand that. And so much has changed in 22 years. The quality of my camera on my digital phone is better quality than the digital camera that we shot this film on. The editing is so much easier right now. I often wonder sometimes if the filmmakers of old were to come back and look now, would they think we were cheating? There are so many things I've learned since making this film, so many things I've applied to short films that I've made since this time, and I wish I had known then. I look back at this film now and realize that I'm about 80% happy with it, and about 20% I would have done stuff differently. And some of it was changed for the better with the editing, with the recut, with making it into black and white. The creation of this film has actually evolved over 20 some odd years. Here we are back in the science building, and Minetti is going to ask this fellow, who's our good friend John Latreris, where the frat house is, because he's going to look for the frat boys. Max came up with this brilliant idea that implicated the frat boys in Jake's death. And there I am again, and there's the frat, there's Dennis. We're back at that frat house. That was Silverton again. And now this is actually a pool room in Georgian Court. So it's really kind of neat when you know how things were cut together, how they were edited. And when you show it to somebody and they think it's seamless, that's part of the trickery of film. Back then, when we were also importing scenes, it would take as long as the actual scenes were to import. So it felt like a very long time that Greg and I spent on actually getting this film together. And just to think now, as I record this commentary, I'm doing it on my cell phone over this film. God, if we had that technology then, how much time it would have saved us. So things have definitely changed in 22 years. I have so many memories of the editing program crashing and having to start scenes over, in some cases having to start the whole movie over again. So technology, I think, is a good thing, ultimately. I guess the downside is it just makes us very, very lazy. I look at old films and I look at when they gathered thousands of actors together. That was thousands of actors together. They weren't painted in, they weren't CGI'd in. I mean, that's how amazing things are now. So technology has saved us a lot of time when it comes to this. And the fact that there are so many social outlets and media platforms that we can present our work, that's different too. So back to the movie, Max and Jane were just discussing how close Minetti is getting, but Max is kind of enjoying this experience a little bit. And so is Jane, though it is making her nervous. Max is saying it's like a movie, but she's saying it's real life. And again, like that line earlier about reality, that's one of the other themes of this movie. Max has his own take on life. He understands it through the world of movies, but not really the world of reality, because he's always been in his own reality. And now he's worried about Sandy, who didn't show up to film class. And she was kind of depressed and she's taking medication, and he's worried about her because he cares about her. He told her in the Arboretum earlier that Jane was his girlfriend, so she's no longer pursuing him romantically, but they have this connection where she understands him and he understands her. So despite the fact that Sandy is upset, Max is encouraging her to return to film class. Now, we know this has something to do with him taking Sally's movie when he said earlier, time to edit. So that's about to pay off in the next scene. I think we did a fairly good job of editing these conversations, which were shot at different times. And when you watch the film, they really flow well together. So as we continue on, we find ourselves back at film class. The teacher even wakes up Dennis before Sally's project begins. Now, at this point, we should be anticipating some crazy stuff that Max has in mind. And it will pay off right now. Knowing that Sally brought Max's film to the frat house and played it, and that eventually led to Jake's death, you don't feel really sad for Sally here. If anything, you want Max to get a little payback. So there's that beautiful flower, and someone says, oh, the flower, I love that image, isn't that terrific? And then we cut to horse shit, because that's about what Max thinks about her films. And as this is going on, and she's upset saying someone played with her movie, and the teacher says, let's watch the rest of it before the discussion, we cut back now to Minetti looking for a TV set in Max's room, and the RA lets him in. So we cut between that suspense. Oh, and there's a naked guy, which was actually Greg Wilson who shot that. We shot that in the woods very carefully behind Ocean County College, and making sure no one saw that. And I have to say, Greg, what a trooper. Meanwhile, people are making fun of Sally's movie because he did such a hatchet job on it, and calling it shit, and there it is in the end. And that shot actually came from an African safari that Greg was on. And Sandy trips Sally, and the whole class laughs at her. Meanwhile, Minetti's thinking, where's this broken TV set? Max had replaced the TV with a smaller one in the meantime. So will he find it? And Max is telling the teacher, touche. And the teacher says, I'll give you this one, because I guess she feels a little responsible the way she made fun of Max's movie. Dean, the RA, is saying, I don't think Max is a killer. Sandy is quoting Ricardo Montalban from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. They're both laughing about what happened. But if you notice, in between Sandy and Max is Marjorie's character, Jeannie, and she's looking at them and she's listening. This will pay off very soon. And I love how actors Allie Anderson and Greg Wilson could be so tender toward each other here. It's very, very sweet. Now we cut to Minetti, and he finds a suitcase and the television's in there. So we cut back and forth. Jeannie confronts Max, and wow, is she a bitch. And what acting that is, because Marjorie's one of the nicest people in the world. In fact, we didn't know we can get her to be like this, but she did a really good job. We cut back to Dean about to open the case and reveal the television. Max tells Jane. Jane says, I hope you took the television out. And now we're all worried. And we cut back. Minetti says, holy shit, when he looks inside. So what's going to happen? And Max goes, I did take the TV set out. Minetti opens up the case and sees it, and we see that it is not there. So the TV has been taken out. So we had a whole little nice suspense scene. And now Minetti regrets suspecting Max at all. It was really fun cutting those scenes back and forth, from the comedy to the suspense. Will Minetti find the television? Back to Marjorie slapping Max in the face. Back to the television. Back to Jane saying, I hope you took the thing out. And they're opening it up, and the TV was gone. So Max now is back in his dorm room, and the phone is going to ring. And this is a typical Gregory Robert Wilson. He takes it, phone falls on the ground, makes a noise, he looks down at it. That's nothing you can write. That is Greg Wilson just being funny. And this is the most close-up we've done for her, because this is a very intimate scene, and boy, she really had to work herself up for it, and I give her a lot of credit. This really says something about the discipline of acting and actors. And she says that when she went back to her dorm, that Marjorie followed her, went in there, and saw her naked. So that's trouble right there. And now she's really depressed. She knows that Marjorie is going to tell everybody, and Max is trying to calm her down and say everything is going to be okay. And things just take a darker turn from this point on. And it's very sad, and Max says, I'm going to try to stop her. And she said, it's too late already. I don't want to look like a fool. She's uncomfortable with who she is. She's never really come to terms with it. Only two of her friends know about her little secret, and Max. And it's very sad when her character decides to commit suicide. It really is. And Max tries to prevent that by calling the RA and telling her to get to the room to prevent her from doing it. And that's Kristen Catalano, who did some great black and white still photography for the film and also helped us out immensely. I remember during the video store sequence, she was very, very helpful. And she does a nice little acting job here. And she breaks in, but unfortunately when she does, it's too late. Sandy has OD'd. And the film gets really dark. And that's our friend Jessica Storer under there, actually, as the dead body. Thankfully, we didn't have to put Allie Anderson through all that. She had been through enough of the previous scene. And this is Max watching Sandy being taken away as Marjorie is laughing at the whole thing. And Sally's character is looking at her like, like that's even a step too far, laughing at her death. And there's that ambulance I told you about. Later that night, we would use it the second time to shoot Minetti's entrance back to campus. And this is Max remembering Sandy in the Arboretum. And the film takes a rough little turn at this point, but a necessary turn to propel the action for the last act of the movie. And we see Greg in all his glory, all his glorious sadness, I should say, with that long curly hair. And now all of a sudden, that hair is gone. Hence the Travis Bickle look, except he just cut his hair really short and not into a mohawk. Because, we didn't want to do that to Greg. The guy's got to live, Plus that Mr. T look had been out since Rocky 3, and we didn't want to do that to Greg. But this scene is really nicely cut and very suspenseful. This is on the campus of Ocean County College by the old gym. And it was nice going back and forth between Max and Marjorie's character, her going in there And, we're wondering, what is he going to do? What's going on? We realize that she's the focus of all his rage right now. And there he goes, all the way up. And he wants to make it to the door just in time before it closes. And we get the impression that he put that thing in front of her that she had to move just to give him time to get up there. So he's there now. And we cut from there to the science building again, which we used for the third time in the film, which really came in handy, these nice hallway scenes. A lot of suspense in this scene. The music is really good. Greg's little subtle movement. Marjorie walking, just looking good. And, of course, that could be taken from any horror film. The shot of the feet walking down there. Marjorie's in the science lab right now. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Bones shows up. There's a skeleton that just rolled in. So what's this all about? She's going to go check it out. And as she checks it out, we're getting a little more nervous. She looks into the other room, and she sees a board, and on the board it says, "Say hello to Sandy for me." And there's even a cute little smiley face. And she turns and screams and sees Max. This scene was originally cut differently, longer shots. I thought it was more effective to go to the black, then go back to the action, then go to the black again, then go back to the action. That shot was taken from outside the science building in. It just made it more brutal. It made it faster. It moved the story along. And it's pretty intense stuff. I mean, this is where Max has pretty much crossed his Rubicon. Things were never the same after this. Jake's death can be self-defense, really, when you think about it. But after he realized he did it and got away with it, he kind of develops this taste for murder. Would it have happened if Sandy didn't kill herself? Probably not. Or maybe so. Maybe someone else down the line would have pissed Max off. Who knows? Here is Jane coming in, seeing Max with his hair for the first time, and she's really freaked out because somebody on campus burned to death, and Max knows exactly who that is because, of course, he did it. And this is where the humor comes in handy there, I think. Like I mentioned earlier about dark comedy, pushes it a little more serious. So when you get the humor, there's a sense of levity. This scene here, we never really put in the original cut, and it was Minetti walking around campus, and I thought it really fit in this scene just to show that he's on the case. And it was shot in the science building where Marjorie was killed. Here we are back in the art room as Jane is looking at her painting, which is a much happier woman this time than the sad one that we had seen earlier and who's made the difference in her life, but Max. We hear Max's thoughts in this scene, and I think it's kind of funny, actually, in that when Cecilia gets up and talks about Marjorie's character, we get to hear Max's thoughts and how ridiculous I think, and this is kind of a commentary on when people die and then all of a sudden they become like saints. Now we know that Marjorie's character was anything but a saint. I mean, she ended up ultimately, whether she realized it or not, pushing Sandy to commit suicide. And Max hearing her talk about Marjorie's character like this just upsets him so much, and that's going to set off the final conflict between him and the film teacher. And I gotta hand it to Greg. He had no problem growing his hair out, and he had no problem shaving it. He's a very, very dedicated actor, and again, he was so dedicated as a producer. No one else could have played this part or understood it the way he did. I mean, he was right there on the ground floor in the writing process from the beginning, but as an actor and instinctually, he did such a good job. And again, so many takes of so many scenes. So here he is now, and he is complaining about Marjorie's character, and he's mentioning, he's going to mention Sandy as well. And they're saying he has no heart, and he says, "I have no heart." Well, who followed me out of this room when I left this room crying after you were all criticizing my movie but Sandy? And then it says, "Is that the chick with the dick?" And everybody starts laughing. And that pushes Max to the limit. I mean, yes, at the time, 2002, I mean, we had a hermaphrodite character. I like to think that was kind of progressive. And She was a good character. We felt empathy for her. She was struggling. She was going through something. Allie Anderson really brought her to life, brought her off the page. And I remember Greg and I showing this film to a producer who you can look up on IMDb, but I won't give you his name, maybe I shouldn't, who had done some real schlocky stuff, and his IMDb movies all got like a 3.5. We went to this guy's house, and he walked downstairs. He made us wait for him like 20 minutes. We had dinner at his house. We showed him the movie, and he was kind enough to say, we have a very sexy murder pick. And then he told us, but you should change the title to Hermaphrodites Have Feelings Too. We thought that was perhaps a step too far and really would have made the film just sound really dumb. And I'm glad we didn't take that advice. But I am very happy that we had a hermaphrodite character in there. I'm glad that the character was well played and that the audience who watches this film really feels for this character. I thought it was important. Now I'm sure I'd be in all kinds of trouble for even presenting it. Greg's character just gave a huge speech to the painting, which he has to do for the art projects that him and Jane are working on. She hasn't seen the painting yet. And nor have we, the audience. She goes to look and he stands in front of him. And she's like, well, it's 2 in a couple of minutes in art class. And that speech is really about how Max feels different. And it ends almost Shakespearean-like with him saying the words, we will rise up and soon we will be storming heaven. And basically that speech is Max's dream. Where different will be good and normal will be boring. He says goodbye to Jane. She doesn't realize it's for the last time, but he does. And as he walks away, boom, who's behind him? But Minetti. And Minetti now has pieced the whole thing together. Now, it's been a lot of fun watching the cat and mouse between these two in the whole film. Why I like this scene and why it's one of my favorites in the movie is we get to see not only has Minetti figured it out, it's how he figured it out. And he's so good and so cool in this scene. And one of the other reasons I like it is Max has been playing Minetti the whole time. And when he realizes finally that Minetti has him, we see the mask slip and we see Minetti see Max for what he really is. And that's a credit to the acting here. Well, we shot this a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different angles, but this was really effective thanks to both of them. And again, the comfort level. You have to be fearless when you do this kind of work because you see everything on film. And you know what works and what doesn't by looking. And this is a very visual society now more than in 2002. So you can't lie on film. You have to tell the truth. And that goes for all acting and all mediums. You have to tell the truth. And it was really great here to see Minetti figure it out and Max start to get worried. And then the mask slip off. And then the scene ultimately ends with him just telling off Minetti and leaving. And Minetti saying, where are you going to go, Max? And he turns around and walks out. But right now, Max is showing his true colors. And Minetti is seeing it. And Greg is just out of control here. And it's great. You got no leads, you come to me. I can't help it if you can't do your job. He walks away. He says, I know. And he's like, fuck you, Columbo, you don't know Dick. And gives him the middle finger and leaves. And then Minetti knows he has him. But he has no proof. Here's a flashback again to the Arboretum, that wonderful stage that's no longer there, and Sandy, who is no longer there. We kept this shot on Greg for a while as the music played, because right after this sequence, we get right into the violence at the end. And we had to see it in his face, the complete transformation of what has to be done now. And here it is at Minetti's house, shot at Scott's house in Toms River. And he opens up the door, and Max is waiting for him. And Minetti goes for his gun, but too late. He Babe Ruths him to death. And now, this was shot in the Fine Arts Building in the back ticket office. And this is him and the film teacher, and Max points to her cup she's been drinking when she realizes it's been poisoned. So that's the end of Minetti. That's the end of her. And wow. And now it's going to be the end of the frat boys. Max is pretty much cleaning house right now. And there's my buddy Mike Toms. I can't remember the name of the other gentleman who played the frat guy, but those two were very effective in this scene shot in Georgian Court, this little phone area here where they're both killed and thrown against the wall. Boom. And Greg's walking out of the Fine Arts Building, Ocean County College here, and does a dance. We hear some really funny music. Then he walks straight ahead as we get ready for the last murder sequence of the film, which I think is the best one. Why I think it's the best one is because Greg storyboarded the entire sequence, and it was very impressive, and it was funny. We have Cecilia's character pulling up in her car here on campus as he's watching Greg's classic car that he still has, I believe, what he will be driving, and soon will be driving actually into her. As we hear the music swells up, I sped it up a little bit in the editing, try to make it look a bit more comic-like, almost movie-like in a silent movie type of way, although there is music playing. And Greg putting the little mouth guard in, and there he goes. Whew. I think I've managed to edit the hit a lot more effectively than in the original cut, and it all is a bit quicker. It's actually a lot of fun to see the blooper reel of Scott standing by the car throwing a dummy of what's supposed to be Cecilia into the car, shot from many different angles. One or two of them look really great, including the one used in the movie, and some of the other ones just look very comical, but that's what's called a practical effects, folks. We weren't CGIing and cheating like they do now. Not that I wouldn't if I had the budget to CGI. And now we cut to a shot in Bayhead. We found out that Max leaves town after murdering Sally, and it's 1 year later. As we see that glide cam come in handy again, and what has happened within that year, but Jane has become the artist she always wanted to, and thanks to Robert Loder, God rest his soul, who was a wonderful artist and friend of our family, he let us use his studio, which was attached to the Shoppers Wharf, which is a place I went to as a kid many times over the years, which was filled with a candy store and a bakery and a craft store. And this studio itself, Robert's studio, moved one more time before his death. This woman here, again, somebody they got on the fly who was a friend of someone, and this woman actually had a antique store in Bayhead for a number of years. She came here and did this little sequence here, and she's delivering a package to Jane. We don't know what it is. We discovered that it's from Max, and there's a note with it because she hasn't heard from Max. It's been a year since Sally was murdered, everyone else was murdered, and Max disappeared. So this is a great place, and for me this is a very nostalgic trip because Robert Loder not only let them shoot all day here, and this was one of the times that I could not make shooting after my dad's death, so Greg Wilson pretty much shot this sequence. And I have so many wonderful nostalgic memories of sitting there with Bob on Sundays as we would discuss our favorite movies. We each had a list of our top 10, and we talk about why we liked it, where we saw it. I miss that man to this day, and I miss all his local paintings. That painting there, again, that she just opened up, which was the painting that Max did in his art class, which he's actually sending to her, was a picture of Max. And it was painted by Terry Pizzuti, who I had mentioned this film is dedicated to. She was a wonderful artist in her own right. And when I look at those paintings behind her in this sequence, I think of Bob Loder and how he was able to capture such beautiful local New Jersey scenes, as well as other states, Rhode Island, all these places. I remember him saying, Darren, whenever you go somewhere, bring a camera. And a lot of times he would snap a nice shot, then get back into his car and go home. And then when he would develop the shot, yes, because he goes that far back in developing film, he would look at it and then do a painting of it. And what an eye this guy had. So Jane just discovers that Max is wishing her well. And telling her how much she meant to him on those spring days in their last semester. And she's getting a feeling, is he around? She almost feels like Max is around, though she can't see him. But he is there, and he is watching. This was not the original ending we wanted it to be, and for some reason never put it in the original cut. But this ending fits as Max looks at her and says, "Be well, Jane, be well." And the sad part about Max at the end, and she's happy to hear from him and to know that he's okay. But the sad part about Max, as he walks away at the end, and there's a full shot of the Shopper's Wharf on the right as Greg crosses that tiny little bridge area, Max realizes that reality isn't the movies. In reality, if you're different, you're treated differently. No one understood him. They didn't understand his movies. And his movies were an escape. They were an escape from his childhood, from his father, from his pain. Murder in the movies is different than murder in real life. I think Max felt he was solving his problems by getting rid of all the people that caused him pain. But the fact is, we all have to deal with our own demons. I also want to mention this film is dedicated to a fourth person, Greg's grandmother, Margaret Crawford Jones. She lived in a lovely old home in Beechwood, New Jersey, and over the years, Greg and I and a bunch of our friends had just a blast there. We used to have our old camcorders. We used to make short films, long films, a lot of good memories there. And she was a great lady. Thank you for going down memory lane with me. This film will always be special to me. We had a group of people that really cared, who really were creative, who wanted to make something interesting, funny, dark. I'd like to thank Greg Wilson and Scott DiPaolo and everyone who helped make this film a reality. I was 30 years old when we started shooting this, lost my father during that time, and he never got to see this film. So for many reasons, this film is special to me. Thank you for listening. And look out, Max is behind you.